Well, hey, everybody. You want to know one way to really work on yourself? Start getting vulnerable. Vulnerability is one of the biggest superpowers you can have, right along with authenticity. So, welcome to the channel. I appreciate you coming back and watching. And let's get into it and see what we can stir up inside of us. So, oftentimes you hear about vulnerability, and people are like, I'm not doing that. I'm not being vulnerable with our emotions. And usually that is a challenge. And we're not only talking about being vulnerable with our emotions, but also just being vulnerable with who we are, right? Actually taking a stand and being who we are. And the one thing that's often keeps people from being vulnerable is the fear of rejection of other people, people's opinions about us, and being rejected by others for being who we are, or talking about where we stand in certain things. So the challenge with the vulnerability piece is what people think vulnerability means. And oftentimes people will see it as a weakness. Don't show anyone your weaknesses. Don't ever talk about this or that. And I'm not suggesting you go out and tell everybody, what your vulnerable spots are, but you need to know what they are. So you can figure that out for yourself. If you don't know where you're vulnerable, or like actually talk to yourself and figure out what you're vulnerable about, you'll be repressing that stuff. You've probably repressed it all your life. So it's not a weakness, and I know it's probably easy, like, oh, here's another person on YouTube, thinks they know what they're talking about and talking about vulnerability, and they have no idea what I've been through. I shared this with somebody and then they used it against me. And you know what? That can happen. You can choose to be vulnerable with people and they may use it against you. And it just goes to show you can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do. You can control how you respond to those types of situations. You can control what you share with people, and you can control your level of honesty with yourself. And if you're always worried about doing that, are you really being vulnerable with yourself? Because it's not about the vulnerability just with others, but it's going inside, like going deep inside of yourself and really figuring that out for you. It's not about, well, if I'm vulnerable with this person, then they'll do that. That's not vulnerability, that's manipulation. That's expressing something, if you choose to express it to somebody else, in hopes that they'll respond in a way that's favorable to you or works out in your favor. And we often get caught in that dynamic, right? Like, well, my therapist told me to be vulnerable with my partner, and I was, and they didn't listen to me and they used it against me. Being vulnerable with somebody is not about controlling how they're going to respond to that. Being vulnerable is letting them know how you feel. And if you're struggling with that, it may not be something you're ready to do. Oftentimes in my own life, I've said to people, this is a Luke issue, but this is how I feel about it. I'm not expecting you to change, but this is how I feel about it. And so even in the process of doing that, because beforehand I would say, well, when you do these things or say these things, this is how I feel. And that is true. That is a great place to start. But when you actually take it another step and go, this is how I feel, I realize this is a me issue, because it's obviously not bothering you, but it's bothering me. And I'm not expecting you to change, but I am going to tell you how I feel about it. And that shift, you take complete ownership. You're not blaming them. You're just commenting on something they said or some sort of behavior they did. and you realize you can't make them change, and it's not a threat, like either you change or I'm leaving, because that's a pretty, you better be willing to do it, where it becomes a pretty open ended, non viable threat. And once people catch on that that's what you're doing, you're not really being vulnerable. You get caught up in that, I'm afraid to actually leave. And I'm not suggesting you go out and leave your relationship or leave your job or leave your friendship or leave your family. But what I'm talking about is that be vulnerable enough with yourself to share with how you're feeling or how you're thinking, right? And one of the more easier ways to start working on this is sort of pick an area where you feel pretty confident in, but where you know that it may cause a little bit of friction. And what do I mean by that friction? I'm not suggesting you go out and irritate people, but I am suggesting, like, if someone talks about something and you don't agree with it, just say, well, I can see why you see that, but I don't really agree with that. Oh, yeah, well, you're just trying to be difficult. No, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just don't see it that way. Right. And then you're opening yourself up to showing how you feel about something, how you think about something. And it may seem so silly and easy, but ask yourself how many times you don't actually share how you feel about something, especially when it goes against the grain of other people or people you really care about. Now, when you'll say things like that and someone's response is, well, I can really appreciate you sharing that. We obviously have different um, opinions about this, but that's okay, because we all don't have to agree with each other, right? We all don't have to like what everyone else likes, because if you're in a situation where you just like what the other person likes, you're you're not showing any of your authentic self, any of your vulnerability. You're just going along to get along. And that's only going to work for so long. And then eventually you'll repress that stuff for so long. And then, like a pressure cooker, it needs to let off steam and it comes out. So take that little pressure thing off yourself and just start talking about certain things you feel about and certain things the way you see them. Right? It doesn't mean you're right. It just means that's how you see it. That's how you feel about it. I mean, there's often in DBT therapy, they talk about you can be right or you can be effective. And when you have the insight to be okay with just being effective rather than having to be right, like, think about it. Like, when you can decide, well, I don't agree with them, but I want this relationship, I want our friendship. So being more effective and letting this go, letting this disagreement go. Right? It doesn't mean you're super agreeable either, right? You can be non-agreeable, but not be super controversy about it. You'd be just like, no, I just don't see it that way, you know. But I can understand why you do. And there's that change, right? If you're talking about your vulnerability and you're sharing things that are important to you for the simple reason of sharing them, because that's how you feel, rather than, um, well, I'll just share this and then they'll do what I want, or then we'll just get along, right? It's often you'll hear the saying, you know, happy wife, happy life, or happy husband, happy life. And that's simply not true, because you'll probably have more people respecting you to actually take a stand and be like, yeah, no, I don't agree with that, but I can understand. And you don't have to say it in a way that's like, no, I totally disagree with that. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. And you're stupid for thinking that. That's not a way to have a conversation with somebody. I mean, you can. it's probably going to go sideways on you, and it's going to open up a whole other ball of wax. But when you realize all you can control is you, and you can maybe influence people or give them your side of things without having to try to take control over them, then you're in the game. That's where all the juice is. That's where the magic is. When you actually start sharing how you feel about things. And when you're okay when people don't like you. They don't like your opinions. They don't like something you're saying. It's okay. It's okay if people don't like you. Right? And just that doesn't adjust your worth in any other way. I mean, they can like what you say. Like if they like what you say, does that change who you are? No. If they don't like what you say, does that change who you are? No. Right? When you find that middle spot, that sweet spot, when you're vulnerable enough with yourself to be who you are, and you realize you're enough exactly how you are, then that's when vulnerability becomes a superpower. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was some sort of service to you. It's great if you can share this with people. It helps me out, helps this channel out and what I'm trying to do. And I would really appreciate it. And share it as much as you want. That would be great. And we'll take care and we'll see you again.